Today we're going to make sauerkraut with cabbage from the garden. Making sauerkraut is really easy. You just need some salt, cabbage, and a big mixing bowl, a weigh scale, a knife, and a cutting board. And our first step involves taking the core out of the cabbage. So you divide your cabbage into 4 pieces, cut the core out because you don't want to have that in your cabbage. It's kind of tough. And then you weigh it. So what we have here is about 1 kilogram of cabbage, and we want to add enough salt to turn it into sauerkraut, and that amount of salt is 2%. So we're going to add 20 grams of salt to shredded cabbage and mix it all together in this bowl. So here's the cabbage, and it's inside the clay pot, and I'm going to add some Himalayan pink salt, and so we have 1 kilogram of cabbage in here, and 2% of that. 2% of the 1 kilogram cabbage is 20 grams. So I'm going to take 20 grams of this salt and sprinkle it on and mix it around. And I'll show you that process in a minute. 20 grams of salt is a little bit more than 1 tablespoon. So I've added the salt to this, and now what you do is you just squeeze it and work that salt into the cabbage, so that the salt then will break the cell walls of the plant tissue and release all that good juice from the cabbage. And we'll end up having a bit of a liquid slurry here after about 5 to 10 minutes of doing this. And then we just take that slurry and all the cabbage and we put it into our large container there, or glass jar, and we ensure that the cabbage is all submerged underneath its juices using a weight, and then we'll put a coffee filter over the jar secured with an elastic band and let it sit for about 2 to 3 weeks. So now what we do is we take the cabbage mixture and pack it into this large jar. You can see the cabbage is being forced underneath its own liquid. And so we'll take some more. I've got lots of juice in this ceramic container as well that I use to mix the cabbage with the salt. So you just keep packing it in. And eventually we'll have the entire cabbage packed in here, and we want to make sure that all the cabbage material is below the surface of the salty water that's being extracted from the cabbage cells. So here is that entire cabbage submerged in its own juices using the miracle of salt. So there's 20 grams of salt in this mixture. And now what we're going to do is weigh this cabbage material down so that it stays submerged under the liquid. And then we'll put a coffee filter over the top of the jar with an elastic band to keep any dust and other materials out of the jar while it sits on the shelf. And it'll give off carbon dioxide and it'll just, the carbon dioxide will just come through the coffee filter. So here's the product ready to go on the shelf. So we have our cabbage. We have all of the brine that came out of it, and I put took a leaf off of a cabbage, an outer leaf, and trimmed it so it was somewhat circular, and placed it over top of all the cabbage, and then pushed the whole thing down so it was used like a little plate, and it pushed all the cabbage down below the liquid. So this, you can see all the plant material is below the water level, and that way it will all ferment, and you won't have any mold or bacteria growing on your plant material if it gets above the water, which can sometimes happen. So everything's submerged and it's ready to go, and it should start bubbling fairly shortly. And in about 4 days, all the good bacteria will have developed within this, and we can start eating it if we want. So I might try it at that point, and then we'll definitely try it in around 2 weeks, and maybe even need it longer.